which again affects certainly Holyrood and the public in Scotland. And it came from Kemi Badenoch. She is the Women and Equalities Minister, amongst other things. She said if the Conservatives win this election, they would rewrite the Equality Act to make it clear that sex means biological sex, which would give confidence, the Conservatives say, to hospitals or domestic refuges who provide single-sex spaces to be able to turn away trans women without fear of being sued. Have a listen to what she had to say.
It's quite clear that the intentions in the law are being misinterpreted just because of changes, social changes. And what we are trying to do is re-emphasise that sex in the law means biological sex. It always has done, but there's been a lot of misinterpretation, and we are adding that clarification so that the law is clearer.
Deanna, as a young Conservative woman, do you welcome what Kemi Badenoch was saying?
I don't at all. I think, regrettably, the debate around trans issues right now seems to be used as some kind of political football for this mythical culture war that the Conservative Party seems to be fighting. I don't know why we're fighting it. I don't know who we're fighting specifically, and particularly in an election where most people's minds are on cost of living, pound in their pocket, the state of public services. I don't know why this is something that we even need to be focusing on at all. And when I think about, what I consider to be the proudest achievements of the Conservatives being in office since 2010, same-sex marriage, I think, for me, was a real turning point. It's a thing that really cemented my place in the Conservative Party, because it showed where a party of tolerance, a much more modern party, and a party that isn't afraid to do something that might frustrate its own base sometimes, but because it's the right thing to do. And it feels to me like the rhetoric around not just trans issues, but LGBT issues more broadly is so toxic. There's so much heat in the debate, and I think it's dangerous.
And as part of this, Kemi Badenoch sending out a message to the SNP that gender recognition, she says, if the Tories win, will be a reserved matter. So the Westminster government would take charge of that kind of area. So the SNP or any other party could not bring in anything like the gender recognition reform bill, which would have made self-ID easier.
I mean, that's not anything new, because, of course, Westminster's already blocked this legislation. But again,
that was under the Scotland Act, which the SNP voted for.
But it's via a lot of the Internal Market Act, as well as giving them freedom to start teetering with things which previously it would have been unfathomable to think that Westminster would do it. So this is actively deriding over devolution once again. But even on the actual subject matter itself, not only is this a desperate plea, just as you say, to try and stir up a culture war in the hope of clawing back some votes, but even just listening to Kemi's interviews today, I don't think she even knows how this is going to work in practice, because the reality is it's not going to work in practice. It's a gimmick, and I don't put it past the realms of possibility that in the next couple of weeks we're going to see things like calling for the death penalty to come back and other, absurd ideas.
There is a petition with over 100,000 names on it, and there are, including Labour MPs, for example, female Labour MPs, who have wanted this clarification about sex-based rights to give more confidence to domestic refugees, hospital wards, etc., etc.
I always get troubled with this point, because in actual fact, if you look at any parliamentary report into this, going back as far as 10, 15 years, it's women's refuges, it's rape crisis, it's Women's Aid who have been saying, we've been dealing with this for years. If anything, the Equality Act was catching up with us.
Sure.
This is a manufactured
The argument is
idea.
it's becoming harder for them to deal with it, and they might be being sued.
I don't see how that's the reality at all.
Let's bring in John Curtis. Where is this issue when it comes to gender identity or trans rights? Where is this in terms of the priorities of voters, John Curtis?
Well, if you take the narrow issue of transgender itself, it's not terribly important. There are people with very strong views on both sides of the argument, but the vast bulk of the British public is somewhere in the middle. Though that said, what is clear is that attitudes towards gender recognition have become less friendly during the course of the debate over the last few years. So public opinion has been swayed away from easing the rules on gender recognition. But the truth is, what this is more broadly about, it's also true about the immigration announcement this evening. The Conservative Party is trying very, very hard to reconnect with those people who voted for Brexit, who for the most part also tend to be conservative on the issue of immigration, tend to be conservative on the issue of transgender, tend to be conservative on the issues of diversity, all of which the Conservative Party have been talking about these days. And they're trying very, very hard in this campaign to reconnect with that base. through all these promises that, as it were, appeal to their values. The problem is, however, is at the end of the day, the cloud that is hanging over the Conservative Party is that so many voters are unhappy with, one, Boris Johnson and Partygate, and two, Liz Truss and her handling of the economy, that as a result, it's very, very difficult for the Conservative Party even to begin to regain the support of those who are relatively close to them on some of these issues, let alone anybody else.
Right. And it's interesting, one Tory MP off the record who is standing down said to me, I heard Labour on the radio this morning saying, you are safe with us. And he said, and I heard the Tories on the radio this morning saying, we know what a woman is. Yeah. And this person was disappointed in that.
It's really uncomfortable. And I have one friend today, I'm sure there are more examples, who's left the Conservative Party today.
As a result
of the
announcement?
Yeah. And I think, you know, we have to think about our longer-term future as a party, and I'm so concerned about how we're treating these sorts of issues that matter to our generation and to those younger than us, the sort of Gen Z kids, who look at our party and go, what on earth are they talking about? They don't speak for us at all.
Yep. And it was interesting that Kemi Badenoch's interview on the Today programme was after an article where she spelt this all out in the Times, and you got the feeling that some people felt, OK, that's contested, but that's put over in a reasonably sort of carefully phrased way. And then she had the interview on the Today programme, parts of which and other interviews were seen by some as rather pugilistic. And the Tory Reform Group, which is the sort of the centre-left group, they said in response to this, the Conservative Party has to think very carefully about the type of campaign it wants to run and the longer-term impact of stoking culture wars. It's clear that voters are rejecting the politics of division. We must not run on wedge issues for a narrow core voter base alone.
If you want to see just how manufactured this is, you only need to look at Kemi's own Twitter history, because only 2 years ago she was singing the praises of gender reform certificates and such like. So again, it's manufactured culture wars to appeal to a base, but the consequence of that is the demonisation and the monstering of one of the smallest and most vulnerable minorities in the UK at the minute. And it's horrific to watch. Horrific to watch.
OK, thank you. Tomorrow night, Rishi Sunak